Get out of my courtroom. I don't care who invited you here. You don't belong in this building, let alone at this table." She said it quietly. The woman in the plain blazer, the one who had come in carrying her own coffee because no one had offered to hold it for her. She said it to no one, really, just under her breath, just to keep herself steady while Harlan Voss leaned across the mahogany table and told her, in front of 40 people, that she should go find herself a seat in the waiting room with the rest of the help. 30 minutes later, a black town car pulled up to the side entrance of the Voss Group's Chicago headquarters. The man who stepped out of it was the one man alive who could dissolve everything Harlan had spent 30 years building. No one in that conference room had any idea. 2 hours before that, the morning had looked like a victory. The Voss Group occupied the top 4 floors of a building on Wacker Drive, all glass and steel and the particular kind of silence that costs money to maintain. Harlan Voss had built it from a regional manufacturing firm into something that sat on the edge of a Forbes list, and he never let anyone forget which direction it was going. Up. Always up. He shook hands in the lobby the way men shake hands when they expect people to remember it. The occasion was the quarterly advisory meeting. 20 partners, 12 board members, a handful of outside consultants brought in because the company was 6 weeks from closing the largest acquisition in its history, a medical technology firm out of Raleigh. The deal would double Voss Group's market cap. The financing ran through a single institutional partner. Harlan knew their name. He had not yet met their representative. She was supposed to arrive at 9. At 8:55, a woman walked through the glass doors in a charcoal blazer that had seen better days, carrying a canvas tote bag and a paper cup of coffee from the place on the ground floor. The receptionist assumed she was with catering. She waved her toward the back hall. The woman smiled and said politely that she was actually here for the 9 o'clock. The receptionist looked her up and down. "Are you sure?" "Quite sure," the woman said. "Thank you." Her name was Ava Morrow. She was 43 years old, and she had the kind of face that people tended to underestimate on first glance. No makeup worth mentioning, hair pulled back, the slight distraction behind her eyes of someone who was already 3 steps ahead in a conversation they hadn't started yet. She had driven herself. She had parked in the public garage 2 blocks away and walked because the morning air was clean and she liked walking when she had to think. She did not look like the managing director of Stonebridge Capital. That was, more or less, the point. Ava found her own seat at the far end of the conference table and set down her coffee and her tote bag and opened a legal pad to a fresh page. No assistant, no entourage, no one leaning in to whisper things in her ear. A few of the consultants glanced at her and glanced away. One of the board members asked someone quietly who she was. Nobody seemed to know. At 9:15, Harlan Voss entered the room with 4 people behind him. He was broad-shouldered and silver-haired, and entirely certain of himself, in the particular way of men who have confused the deference of employees for the respect of equals. He worked the room for 12 minutes before he sat down, shaking hands, laughing at his own jokes, touching people on the arm to show them he remembered their names. When his eyes passed over Ava, they didn't register anything. She might as well have been a chair. His wife, Celeste, had come up for the occasion. She sat 2 seats from the head of the table in pale cream silk, impeccably turned out, the kind of woman who made quiet maintenance look effortless. She had attended every major meeting for the past decade, not because she held a formal role, but because Harlan liked her there. She was good at reading rooms. She was less good at hiding when she had already decided what she thought. Celeste looked at Ava the way you look at a smudge on a window. One of the junior consultants, a young man named Brett, asked Ava if she wouldn't mind moving to the side chairs since the table seats were reserved for principals. He said it nicely. He really did believe it. Ava looked at him for a moment. "I'm fine here," she said. "Thank you, Brett." He blinked. He didn't know how she knew his name. The meeting began. Harlan worked through the agenda the way he did everything, with the forward momentum of a man who has decided in advance that he is the smartest person in the room. The acquisition terms, the integration timeline, the financing structure. He talked about the Stonebridge partnership as though he understood it thoroughly. He used phrases like, "our institutional ally," and "the capital partner we've cultivated." He did not say he had never actually met anyone from Stonebridge in person. Ava listened. She took notes. She did not interrupt. Around the 40-minute mark, There was a pause in the presentation while someone from the legal team fumbled with a slide. Harlan's eyes drifted to Ava. He had noticed the canvas tote bag. He had noticed the coffee cup. He had noticed that she had not been introduced. He smiled the way powerful men smile when they are about to demonstrate something. "Excuse me," he said loud enough for the room. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. Are you with the catering team?" A few people stiffened. One or two looked down at their phones. Ava set her pen down. "No," she said, "I'm not." Harlan's smile didn't shift. "Then who are you with?" "I'm the representative from Stonebridge." A beat of silence. Harlan laughed, the short, disbelieving kind. He looked around the room as though checking to see whether anyone else had heard the same thing. "Stonebridge sent you?" "They did," Ava said. "I'm the managing director." Harlan studied her the way he might study a document he suspected of being fraudulent. The canvas bag, the blazer, the paper cup. His expression didn't say she was lying, exactly. It said she couldn't possibly be telling the truth. He leaned back in his chair. "Managing director. That's right? Of Stonebridge Capital." "Yes." He turned to the man on his left, his general counsel, a sharp-faced man named Owen, who had been with the firm for 20 years. Owen was already looking at his phone under the table, running a quiet search. His face had not changed yet. Harlan turned back to Ava. "And you drove yourself here?" "I did." "In what?" She looked at him steadily. "A car." Someone at the far end of the table pressed their lips together. Not quite a smile. Harlan was warming to this now. He liked an audience. He always had. "Well," he said, "we were expecting someone a little more." He paused deliberately. "Senior." Given the size of the transaction, Ava picked up her pen. "I understand. I'm sorry to disappoint you." "I'm not disappointed," Harlan said. He spread his hands, cautious. "This is a very significant deal, and I want to make sure we're talking to the right people." "You are," she said. Harlan looked at her blazer. He made no effort to hide it. "How long have you been with Stonebridge?" 12 years, Ava said. "And before that?" She tilted her head. "Before that I was a federal judge." The room went quiet in a different way than it had gone quiet before. "A federal judge," Harlan said. "Eighth Circuit," Ava said. 7 years. "Before that, general counsel at Meridian Partners. Before that, I clerked for 2 justices on the Supreme Court." She paused. "But I imagine none of that is on the slide deck your team prepared." It was not. Owen looked up from his phone. His face had changed. He had found what he was looking for, and it was not what Harlan wanted him to find. Owen cleared his throat once, softly, and said nothing. Harlan recovered quickly. He always did. He smiled the smile he used at press conferences. "Well, welcome. Glad to have you here. Should have done proper introductions at the start." He waved a hand as though the previous 10 minutes had been a small procedural error, easily corrected. Ava said nothing. The meeting resumed, but the room had shifted in the way rooms shift when someone has misread something significant. People were quieter. They listened more carefully to Ava's questions. Her questions, it turned out, were very good. She had read everything. She had read things that weren't in the packet, too. Prior filings, regulatory correspondence, a quiet note in a subsidiary's balance sheet that 3 people in the room had hoped would go unnoticed. She asked about it without raising her voice. Harlan's answers became shorter. At the break, Celeste materialized at Ava's elbow with a cup of coffee, real coffee, from the machine in the side room, not from the lobby stand. "Here you are," she said with the warmth of a woman recalibrating. "I hope the morning's been comfortable." "I'm fine," Ava said. "Thank you." Celeste tilted her head. "You know," she said with a small, practiced laugh, "Harlan is just very protective of this deal. He's worked so hard, you understand how it is. Men like him." Ava looked at her. She didn't say anything mean. She didn't have to. "I understand a lot of things," Ava said. She picked up her legal pad and went back to her seat. The break ended. The room filled again. And that was when Harlan made the mistake that could not be walked back. He had been talking to his outside PR consultant, a woman named Dana, in the hallway during the break. He had talked too close to the open door. He didn't think it mattered because he was talking about someone who, in his mind, didn't count. "She's not what we asked for," he said. "I don't care what her title is. Look at her. She came in here with a tote bag and a $5 coffee, and she thinks she belongs at that table with people who built something. That's not a partner. That's a liability." Dana said something quiet. "I want the actual decision-maker," Harlan said. "Not their errand girl." He said the last 2 words the way other men say something worse. Light and dismissive, certain no one important was listening. 3 people in the hallway had heard him. One of them was Ava. She had stepped out to return a call. She was standing around the corner, phone in her hand, face perfectly still. She listened. She did not react. She put her phone back in her pocket and walked back into the conference room and sat down. And that was when the afternoon changed. The post-break session opened with the financing structure. Harlan had prepared a full presentation. His team had spent 3 weeks on the slide deck. It was impressive. It was also built on an assumption that Stonebridge would extend a draw period that Ava had never agreed to extend. It was buried on slide 41, framed as a mutual understanding. Ava let him get through 30 before she raised her hand. "Harlan," she said. He looked at her. "The draw period on slide 41. I need to stop you there." Harlan blinked. "That was agreed upon in preliminary discussions." "No," Ava said. "It was proposed in preliminary discussions. It was never agreed to." He leaned forward. "I have emails." She opened her tote bag and pulled out a folder. "I have the same emails," she said. "I'd like to walk through them together." Owen put his pen down very slowly. What followed was 35 minutes of the most precise, methodical dismantling of an assumption that anyone in that room had ever witnessed. Ava did it without raising her voice. She did it without a single personal remark. She simply laid the documents on the table, page by page, and walked through them the way a judge walks through a record, sequentially, without haste, without apology. By the end of it, the draw period extension was gone, and 2 other assumptions had quietly collapsed with it. The deal was still alive, but it was different now, smaller in certain ways, more honest. Harlan's face had gone through 4 colors. He was currently on the one that looked like controlled fury. He waited until the room was finishing up, until the board members were closing their notebooks, and the consultants were checking their phones. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. And then he walked to where Ava was still seated, packing her legal pad back into her tote bag, and he stood over her. "Let me be very clear about something," he said. His voice was low. "This was not for the room. This was for her. I don't know what you think just happened here, but I have lawyers who have been doing this for longer than you've been alive. This deal closes on our terms. I've built relationships in this city that you cannot imagine, and whatever you think you proved in there, it won't matter. Not in the long run, because people like you don't stay in rooms like this. You visit." He let that land. Ava looked up at him. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She looked the way she had looked on the bench for 7 years, patient and very, very awake. "Mr. Voss," she said, "I'd like you to remember this moment." "What moment?" "This one," she said. "The one where you had the chance to behave differently and chose not to." He smiled. "Like I said, errand girl." He walked away. Ava zipped her tote bag. She thanked the catering staff by name on her way out. She held the elevator for a woman carrying too many folders. She walked the 2 blocks back to the public garage in the clean morning air. In the car, she made a single call. "Put the Voss financing on hold," she said. "I'll need the board available tonight." A pause on the other end. "All of them?" "All of them," she said. She drove home. What happened next did not wait for morning. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Stonebridge's formal hold notice had arrived in Owen's inbox. By 5, Owen had gone directly to Harlan's office and closed the door behind him and said things that no one outside that office heard but that left Harlan standing at his window with his hands flat on the glass. By 6, 3 members of the Voss Group board had called each other, and none of those calls ended well. The deal was not dead, but it was on a table with a sheet over it, and nobody was sure who had the key. The next morning, Harlan's assistant called Stonebridge to request a meeting. She was told that Ms. Morrow would be in touch. She was not told when. That was its own kind of answer. Harlan spent the day managing. He was good at managing. He had a machine built for it. Press contacts, board relationships, lawyers on retainer, a PR firm that had handled worse. By noon, he had a narrative, a miscommunication. 2 strong parties, each with their own expectations. These things happen in complex deals, nothing irreparable. His people pushed that version hard. What they didn't know was that the hallway had been recorded, not deliberately. A board member's assistant had been setting up the AV system for the afternoon session. The laptop had been open. The microphone had been live. 14 minutes of hallway audio, including Harlan's comments about errand girls and people who visit rooms like this, had been sitting in a shared drive since that morning. The assistant didn't realize what she had until someone asked her to clean up the meeting files that evening. She listened to it once. She sat very still for a long time, then she forwarded it to Owen with a single line, "I think you need to hear this." Owen listened. He poured himself a glass of water. He sent it to the board chair. The board chair's name was Josephine Ladd, and she had been managing Voss Group's governance for 9 years. She was 61 years old, and she had heard a lot of things in boardrooms that she wished she hadn't. She listened to the recording twice, quietly, in her home office with the door closed. Then she called 2 other board members. By the following morning there was a board meeting that Harlan had not called. He arrived to find 10 people already seated, Josephine at the head, Owen to her right, looking like a man who had not slept. The outside counsel at the far end, yellow notepad out, pen uncapped. "Harlan," Josephine said. "Sit down, please." He sat. She played the recording. He did not move while it played. He did not look at anyone. When it ended, Josephine set her hands on the table. "Harlan," she said, "I've known you for a long time. I want to give you the opportunity to respond." He tried several things. He tried context. It had been a tense morning. The deal was under pressure. Anyone might have. He tried proportion. It was a private hallway, not a formal statement. He tried the version where he didn't quite remember saying it that way. None of it moved the room, because the recording was very clear, and because while Harlan was working through his responses, Josephine had already spoken to Ava. The call had happened the night before. Josephine had reached out directly, person to person, board chair to managing director, and she had said plainly that she was sorry. Not sorry as a strategy, sorry as a human being. Ava had listened. She had said she appreciated it. She had also said that Stonebridge's position was unchanged until the board demonstrated it was prepared to address what had happened. She did not tell Josephine what she expected. She didn't have to. The board was full of people who had spent careers learning how to read the space between what someone says and what they mean. They read it. Harlan was removed as chairman of the acquisition process that same afternoon, replaced by a 3-person oversight committee. It was framed publicly as a structural decision. Everyone in the room knew what it was. He retained his CEO title for 11 more days. On the 12th day, 3 major investors filed a joint statement expressing concern about leadership and governance. 2 of them cited the recording, which had by then been reported on in 2 business publications. The story had been picked up not because anyone had leaked it strategically. The assistant who found the file had simply mentioned it to a colleague who mentioned it to someone else. And the way these things travel now, it had moved faster than anyone managed. The headline was not kind. Voss Group CEO called female partner errand girl before financing collapsed. It was not the worst headline possible, but it was enough. Enough for the pension fund that held 8% of Voss Group shares to call for an emergency governance review. Enough for 2 partners on the acquisition target side, the Raleigh firm, to ask politely whether the leadership situation was going to stabilize before they were comfortable closing. Enough for the company's stock to drop 14% in 2 days, which was not catastrophic but was the kind of number that makes a board's decision very easy to explain to lawyers. Harlan resigned on a Thursday. The statement his team released called it a planned transition. Nobody said the word resign. The business press used it anyway. He was 58 years old and he had built something real, and he walked out of a building he had put his name on with a box of personal items and a security guard beside him, which was not how he had imagined that morning going when he woke up. His wife Celeste had nothing to say publicly. Privately, she had quite a lot to say, and she said it in the car on the way home, and Harlan spent the drive looking out the window. The legal piece came afterward, and it was quieter but no less real. 3 employees came forward in the weeks following the recording's publication. They had been in the building at various times, in various capacities, and they described other things Harlan had said in other hallways to other people who hadn't been recording anything. Their accounts were consistent. Their timing, in the wake of a story that had already been told publicly, gave them something they hadn't had before, which was the reasonable certainty that they would be believed. The company settled all 3 claims. The terms were sealed, but a clause in each settlement required a formal written acknowledgement, signed by Harlan personally, that the conduct described had occurred. He signed it. His lawyer advised him to. The alternative was worse. The acquisition did eventually close. 11 months later, under new leadership, on terms much closer to what Ava had put on the table in that conference room. The Oversight Committee had rebuilt the financing structure from the ground up. With Stonebridge as the lead partner, Josephine Ladd was the one who called Ava to tell her the final terms had been agreed. Ava said she was glad to hear it. She was not effusive. She did not gloat. She asked about the Raleigh team and whether they were comfortable with the transition timeline. She asked about 2 specific employees at Voss Group who had been there through all of it. She remembered their names. She had met them briefly once, and she remembered. That was the thing about Ava Morrow that people tended to learn too late. She remembered everything. Not as a weapon, not as a ledger, just as the ordinary function of a woman who had spent a career paying close attention in rooms where people assumed she wasn't listening. She gave one interview in the months that followed, not about Voss Group specifically, but about the broader question of how institutions handle credibility. How quickly a room full of people will defer to whoever seems most like what they expect authority to look like. The interviewer asked her what she had thought when Harlan told her she was visiting. She was quiet for a moment. "I thought," she said, "that he was telling me something true about himself, and I thought he would probably regret it." The interviewer asked whether she had felt afraid, or angry, or small, the way he seemed to intend. Ava shook her head. "I've sat on a federal bench," she said. "I've read every kind of human behavior in case files and in person. I've seen people at their worst trying to look like their best. A man who mistakes his own address for his own worth." She paused. "I've met that man many times. He was never the most powerful person in the room, even when he thought he was. Especially then." The interview ran on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the clip of those 2 sentences had been shared more than any single thing Ava had said in her legal career. She was already somewhere else by then. Another meeting, another deal, another room full of people sorting out who they thought mattered and who they thought didn't. She walked in carrying her own coffee. She found her own seat. She opened her legal pad to a fresh page. She did not need anyone to know who she was. She never had. That was the whole point. Here is the thing I keep coming back to now that this story has settled. Most of us will never be Ava Morrow. We won't have the record, the resume, the quiet exit followed by a phone call that changes everything. Most of us, when someone looks through us in a room and tells us we don't belong, just have to absorb it, swallow it, walk home with it. But here's what that story asks anyway. Not what Harlan did, because we know what he did. What did the other people in that room do? The ones who watched, the ones who looked down at their phones when Brett asked Ava to move to the side chairs, the ones who covered a small laugh when Harlan said errand girl, and then 12 days later said privately that they'd always had concerns about his leadership. The real question in that conference room was never Ava's, it was everyone else's. Because most of us are not the Harlan in the room. We are not the Ava. We are the ones in between, and what we do in that moment. Whether we shift in our chair or look down or stay very interested in our own notebooks, that's the choice that actually shapes what those rooms become. So I want to ask you directly, if you had been sitting at that table when Brett asked her to move, what would you have done? Be honest. Drop it in the comments. I read all of them. And if this story stayed with you, do me a favor. Like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories about the people who walked quietly into rooms that underestimated them and walked out having changed everything. The most powerful person in any room is rarely the loudest voice in it. Sometimes she's the one at the far end of the table with a canvas tote bag and a $5 coffee and a legal pad full of things you should have read before she got there.